Good evening. Happy middle of the week. Greetings to the 12 tribes of the children of Israel by blood, who, according to the Bible, are scattered into the four corners of the earth, having been separated from their land and scattered even from their tribes because of disobedience to their God, and who also, according to the Bible prophecy, are now awakening as to the past mistakes and repenting and coming back to the God of their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Greetings. Greetings also to the 144,000 who are among them, according also to Bible prophecy, being prepared by the Spirit that had been given to Elijah, and studying their Bibles to be able to be led by that same Spirit to teach as the Levites did and Moses did. Greetings. And also to those who are not of the bloodline, those who are not the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but also want that salvation and that God to be theirs. The Bible calls you Gentiles grafted into the olive tree of the chosen people. Greetings to you as well. Blessings upon those that work in the healthcare field and the first responders who every day are trying to save lives. Blessings upon those that pick up garbage to keep streets and sidewalks clean, and those that make deliveries for our convenience. Double blessings on the men and women trying to help rescue, deliver, recover the victims of human trafficking, of sex slavery, the victims of prostitution and child prostitution, the victims of pornography and child pornography, of child molestation and pedophilia, and double curses on the perpetrators, the profiteers, and the perverts who traffic in this human misery. Finally, blessings upon the homeless. Nearly 600,000. One day I wish that I won't be able to have to say that. Nearly 600,000 men, women, and children that live on the streets in the United States of America, and millions around the world in similar or worse conditions. Blessings upon them. May the Most High look upon them, for theirs is the kingdom, and those that are trying to help. Greetings also to the brothers and sisters in the chat, Brother Mark, Brother Williams, Brother Righteous is the Way, Junior, Brother Maturity Approach, Brother English is welcome, and those also who come after. Praise the Most High. I am so grateful, and I really do give thanks every day for the knowledge of understanding that this world system will soon come to an end, and that there will be no more the things that I just talked about. There'll be no more homelessness. There'll be no more emergencies. There'll be no more disease. There'll be no more perverts and profiteers and perpetrators. There'll be no more homeless. There'll be no more need for hospitals or first responders. There'll be no more corruption or greed. There'll be perfect peace and righteousness on the earth. And I praise the Most High for being born at such a time as this, that we will be able to realize it in our lifetime. In that regard, this is the greatest time in history, but as we also know, it is the worst time in history for all the same reasons. So today, the human mind is under attack in a way that it has never been, in terms of the level of intensity, the level of takeover of the human mind has never been at this type of height. And just the other day, what caused me to contemplate this subject. Just the other day, young Asian girl, I don't know where she was coming from, but she was going to her apartment in Chinatown in New York, a Korean young lady. And a homeless man followed her. I don't know where he first saw her. It's unclear at this point. The police say there was no previous meeting between these two, but he's homeless and he followed her into her apartment, forced his way when she opened the door, and she screamed loud, as she should have. Neighbors heard her scream and called 911. And by the time the cops got there, which was not that long, just a couple of minutes, there was a response. He had stabbed her to death and left her body in her bathtub. And they caught him. He barricaded himself in her apartment, and they eventually busted in and got him, covered in blood. It was horrible. But the thing that stuck out to me is what the man was saying when he left the apartment building in custody, and what he was saying even the next day after they had arraigned him in court and were bringing him, I assume, to Rikers Island. He said emphatically, "I didn't kill nobody. Why do you arrest me? I didn't hurt nobody." And the way he was saying it with such conviction, I was reminded of multiple times in past history when people had committed heinous crimes and then had no recollection of the crime. And there was also been testimony, because somebody could say I'm doing a conspiracy theory, but I put in the description box testimony and records of government-sponsored mind control program. And there's more official records. They shut the records and destroyed records, so they were only available to a certain year. I think it was sometime in the 70s. That started in the 50s, this MK Ultra program. And part of the revealed record is that there was a movie called The Manchurian Candidate. Now, the modern version of it was with Denzel Washington, but the old version, the first one, was Frank Sinatra in the late 50s, early 60s, maybe it was 1960, 61. Well, anyway, in the movie, you see a foreign power taking prisoners of war, soldiers, prisoners of war, mind controlling them and sending them back to the US. And the soldiers had no recollection of what happened to them. And they would be under the power of certain people in the United States working for those same foreign powers, that under certain codes or conditions, they could turn on or turn off the mind-controlled individual to commit any act, usually murder, that they wanted the individual to commit. And then the individual would not remember anything about what they did. And the reason I brought that up is because these are official released records now. Most of them has been destroyed, as I mentioned, but they're official released records that indicate this actually happened. And we should not be surprised at that, because oftentimes, I don't know why Hollywood does this, but they will give you a preview of what is actually going on. For example, there was a movie in the mid-90s, early 90s called Under Siege. And in this movie, they had the whole New York City shut down because of terrorist cells. And that's the first time I heard the term terrorist cells in New York operating, planning on blowing up the World Trade Center. This was the mid-90s, right? And actually what happened in 2001, we all know, okay? So they have a habit of, bringing this out, maybe to inoculate us against it early. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn if I say that there are a couple of ways that are commonly used to mind control people. One of them is television with the commercials, right? The repetition of the commercials, the music, everything you see in a television commercial, the music, the people, the way they're dressed, the time of the commercial, everything is purposely done. The musical jingles they use, everything is purposely done to cause the person that's receiving it to exhibit a certain behavior, usually to use a product, right? And so they're exhibiting a certain behavior that's being programmed to them, right? I don't think I'm crazy if y'all know that does happen, right? And I recall my own testimony. I was in sales. I started in sales, I think it was 1993. I started doing mortgages. And then by 97, I was doing financial services, sales of stocks and bonds and mutual funds and big time annuities. And one time I was invited to, they used to tell us to read books, and they used to tell us to listen to tapes. At that time, it was tapes. It wasn't DVDs or stuff like you have even now, where you could put stuff on a device. But then it was tapes. Little cassette tapes, and they tell you to listen to these tapes and they were sales techniques. And I did, because I was hungry for money at that time, not knowing what I know now and being apostate from even what I believed then. I was trying to go after that dollar. And so I ate up these techniques. I read the book. One of the books was called Think and Grow Rich. And even in my apostate state, when I read Think and Grow Rich, there was a chapter I had to, even in my mind, I could not read it. This Most High even convicted me, even in my stupidity. It was called auto suggestion. And even though I would learn more later, even at that moment, I realized I don't want to read that chapter, right? And I would skip over that chapter. Now I read the book multiple times, but skip over that chapter, because I knew it was about auto suggestion. Told me all I needed to know. But I still listened to all the tapes. Now, I listened to these tapes, and I would go to fly to different places to people that were speaking about sales techniques. And some years later, actually, one of my supervisors, when I was doing financial planning, one of my mentors said this. He just flippantly said it. We was in a meeting, and he said, because I was the first African-American hired at this firm. There was a financial planning firm. At that time, it was 150 years old, and I was the first Black that they ever hired. And they were taking bets as to how long it would be before I failed, right? And of course, I was determined not to, right? So I was becoming successful there, and they were wondering how I did it, because most of the clients were older white males. And when it comes to money, man, you still see that, that racism, that prejudice. So, they were wondering how I did it. And my supervisor said, well, man, Todd just hypnotizes people. And I kind of caught that. And that's when the spark of what was going on that I didn't realize first hit me. Because the techniques involve different things, mirroring what your potential client is doing with their body, changing the voice and the tone, and touching them even in certain places, without them realizing you were doing it. And I realized, and then there was a pastor that talked about neuro-linguistic programming, and I bought his tape and I listened to him, and what he said was the things that I had been doing for a couple of years. Then I realized were mind control techniques, and believe me, I didn't even know what I was doing. So I had enough sense to understand I was doing it without thinking about it. I was fighting with myself. I was doing it without thinking twice. And I would really get people to do what they weren't going to do. Matter of fact, it got to the point where at the beginning of a year, I would say to my wife, there's a bunch of people out there that I've never met, and I'm going to meet them, and they're going to be reaching into their pocket for their checkbook when I'm done with them. I was that confident in getting business that way. But then now, once my mind was awakened to what was going on and what I was doing, and then realizing I did not even have power to stop. I had to pray. I was in Connecticut at the time. I was in East Hartford, Connecticut. I was living in Connecticut, and it was 2001. And the Most High showed me multiple signs and visions. And what I started doing, I started fasting for 40 hours each week, and I started eating all fruit. And I didn't do it to do it permanently. I was trying to clear my mind so I can hear what my God was trying to tell me to do. And he was showing me, and I told my wife, we're going to move this year. And she said, where? I said, I don't know. I told her that in the first quarter of that year. Then as we got to the summer, he showed me a vision of a state on the wall. And it was a strange shape. And I realized afterwards it was the state of New Hampshire. And I told my wife, we're going to move to New Hampshire. She said, we don't know nobody there. That's up in the middle of nowhere. But later on that year, he also showed me a house we were going to live in. And then later on that year, November of that year, we moved to that house. And it was wild because when we got there, first we were invited there. The people didn't even know me. They just heard about me because I used to also preach at that time. And they didn't know me. They invited me up to this place in New Hampshire, 173 acres in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't no black people up there. And there in the whole town, there was less than 500 people in the town. When I went there, when I got there, I told my wife, I got the feeling we've been here before. I kept telling her, I got the feeling we've been here before. And she said, we have never been up here. And I knew she was telling the truth, but I seemed like I knew every spot. And then we passed this certain house, and I swore I'd seen it before. That was the house in the dream. I wouldn't realize it for a couple of weeks later, maybe a month later. Well, anyway, when I got out there was no TV. These people were living on this land, and they were trying to live like they were in the 1800s. I'm telling you the truth. And they were about to lose the property. They were about to lose it. And the only way they were going to keep it is if they could prove to the people that owned it that they were running some kind of ministry. Enter me. Because at that time I was doing prison ministry. I was preaching. I had just came off an all fruit, 100% raw diet. So I was teaching that. And they said, you could stay here. And they gave me this house it was an old house. And it was exactly what I saw in the dream. And they said, you could stay in this house for as long as you want. And, as long as you do ministry up here. And the Most High showed me in various dreams and in various signs, I would only be there 5 years. And I was there 5 years to the day. That was November 2nd of 2001. And I was there until November of 2006. And he showed me that those people were all going to turn on me. And they did. But that did bother me, but I wasn't surprised because he showed me. But while I was up there, no TV, no sports. It was nature. My kids could just go out in the woods and walk. We would see deer. We would see foxes. We would see moose. And he cleared my mind of those techniques. And it took all 5 years just to get that out of my mind. Okay. That's how strong it was that it had been on me. And then I realized not only had I learned these techniques, but all the pastors that I knew were using it, including the pastor of the church we moved away from when we went to New Hampshire. He was in the church in Connecticut, a Christian church. And the pastor was using the techniques, and it was driving me crazy because I hated to see what he was doing. You could do it on people, like a mass group of people. And he was doing it on the congregation, and they didn't realize what was going on. And so one of the problems I had with him was I believed in the King James Bible, but he came in and he immediately threw out all the King James Bibles and replaced them with New International Versions. And I put up a big stink about it so that people in the church thought something was wrong with me. But I knew what he was doing. He was taking away the word. And then he did a few other things, but then he was controlling the minds of the people. So I came up to him in the middle of after the church service in front of everybody, and I said, "You're changing the word." I said, "Your name's going to be removed from the book of life for what you're doing." And he said, "I can see you have a problem." He said, "Why don't you come to my office?" And I knew what he wanted to do. He thought he was going to hypnotize me. But he didn't know my background, and I didn't say anything to him. So I came into his office, and he started first trying to, I'm a master's of divinity, and I know Greek, and I know Hebrew, he's telling me. And then he starts mirroring me and doing other techniques of mind control. And I'm looking at him, and then he started to laugh. You see, because laughter is one of the techniques when the person that does the techniques are caught, they laugh. They laugh to try to disarm the person that's in front of them. And so he laughed, and I'm just looking at him, and I'm saying, "You're supposed to be a pastor. You're supposed to be helping and lead and teach the people, and you're misleading them." And I said, "I see what you're doing here." And I named the techniques he was using, and he laughed again. He didn't deny it. And he said, "Brother, nobody, people don't know the Bible like you do, so you can't expect everybody to know that." I said, "That's the problem. You are supposed to." And he laughed again. And then all of a sudden it was around the church that I was causing trouble. And eventually that's within a month, the Most High had moved us to New Hampshire. And he was even shocked. He said, "You moving to New Hampshire?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "We're being led there." And that's where I left it. But I realized that all of the pastors in that church, with some few exceptions, were being sent to the Neuro-Linguistic Programming Institutes to learn mind control. And so then I was able to pick it up from other people. Like I said, it took 5 years. The Most High moved me in the middle of nowhere for 5 years for me to learn to stop using those techniques and to get away from them. And it took all of that time. And so I started noticing not only people using them, I noticed when the pastors would use the techniques, and then when you go to buy a car or something, you could see it everywhere. And I started seeing it, and I realized that just like me, some of them they started off trying to practice like they were, some of them weren't very good at it, but the ones that were pros, they do it without thinking about it. It's like somebody else or something else has your mind, and you don't even have to think about the techniques. They just come. And then I realized that politicians, like I saw Bill Clinton using it. And then I saw Barack Obama, and he was better than Bill Clinton at it. And I realized, man, there's a whole thing going on out here where pastors and politicians, and of course, salespeople are using mind control techniques. And in my case, it was masked as sales techniques. So, next time you go to see somebody when you buy a car, are you going to somebody's trying to sell you something? Watch. You're going to see it. Okay. And so I had to learn, or should I say really for the first time, but I can't say relearn, but really learn the power of choice. The power of choice. And that's the greatest power the Most High has given us. And that we look at, for example, look at James in the New Testament, the Apostle James's letter. If you look at James, chapter 1, James chapter 1, beginning at verse 13. James chapter 1, beginning at verse 13. Let no man say when he is tempted that I am tempted of Yah. For Yah cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. So this is the key. This is the hook, brother, if you want to call, for lack of a better word. The devil uses stuff that we like, that are against the Most High, to tempt us. Now, I want to make this very clear and plain so that you don't misunderstand and get deceived. Temptation is not a sin. Temptation is not a sin. To be tempted is no sin. Okay? That's not a problem. We're all sinners. You understand? So, the Messiah was tempted. And he wasn't a sinner, but he was tempted. In his case, the temptation was to use his divine power to save himself. That was the temptation for him. Instead of just trusting his Father and in the Word, which is what he is our example to do. But in our case, we being sinners, our temptation has to do with certain things. It could be lust for something or desire. It could be money, right? That's a big one, right? Money, getting something for nothing, right? That's the temptation. Getting something for nothing, a lust or a physical carnal desire. What else? What is another one? Power, having power, being able to obtain power. Those are the areas that the enemy uses to tempt us. So, for example, for me, my conviction is gambling is stealing. Somebody say, well, why don't you bet? I'm not going to bet on anything. Why would a person bet? Well, they're putting money, right? They're taking money and they're wagering that something's going to happen that they cannot control. And they're going to gain money that they did not earn. So the hook is to get money that you didn't earn. You didn't have to go out and sweat for it. All you had to do was place the right wager. Okay? And so you have millions of people that are hooked on gambling and lose everything because of it. Because the rush that you get from gaining something for nothing is almost like a high. And like every drug, the first high is always the greatest one. And you're always seeking the second one to try to duplicate that feeling you had the first time. And in the meantime, you're getting steeper and steeper in the hole. Okay? That's just one example. But it's anything. You're a woman, you're lonely. So what's the hook when you're lonely and you're a woman? Companionship. Right? Companionship. So somebody that's smooth talking is offering you companionship and telling you all the things that you want to hear. And that person you don't know could ruin you. Somebody asked about the stock market. The stock market is different. Why? What is a stock? What is a stock? A stock is ownership in a company. That's what stock is. Now, I'm not saying that there's not stuff on Wall Street that people are gambling. I'm not saying that. But in terms of stock, like publicly held stock, you are owning a company. So let's say, for example, I was telling my wife the other day, my wife, when I met her 38 years ago, and we've been married 37 years, when I met her, she'd have this little thing of Vaseline in her pocketbook. And she always was putting on her lips and doing her hands and her feet with Vaseline all the time. Her feet to her are always dry, and she always needs Vaseline on her feet and on her hands. And she always putting it on her lips. And being in New York where it's cold and windy, she's always doing that. And so I said to her, You should buy stock in the Vaseline company because you're buying Vaseline, like, you know what I'm saying? So that would be an investment in part ownership in a corporation. That's what stock market is. Okay. That's what it is. So yeah, the stock market's a little different. Now, if you don't know what you're doing, if you're buying a company that somebody just pitched to you and you don't know anything about it, that's gambling. But if you buy, let's say you buy Microsoft products, you buy the software, you buy the computers, you buy all of the Microsoft products, and you really believe in them, it's not a gamble for you to invest in Microsoft because now you're owning Microsoft. That's what a stock is. It's ownership in the company. Okay, so that's different. Gambling is saying there's two teams playing, and I'm going to bet this team wins. When you have no idea, like there's no control, you don't know which player is going to hurt each other or get hurt or how the game's going to change or somebody's going to have a career game. You have no idea, and you're just gambling that this person or this fighter or this track star or whoever is going to beat the others. Okay, that's gambling. Or you're throwing dice. You have no idea if a 7's going to come up, if a 2, if 11 or 2. You have no idea. That's gambling. You understand? So basically, what the point is, though, is that you're being drawn to get something that you didn't earn. Okay, you didn't work, you didn't earn, you just guessed, and money's just coming to you for that. Or you're lonely, and the right person comes along, the right person in your eyes and in your mind. And a person says, looks, sounds like everything you want. Okay? It's a trap. It's a trap. You understand? So there is always a hook. For example, the first bad choice we know was in the Garden of Eden. Right? That's the first bad choice. Genesis chapter 3. Now, I bring up this because, brothers and sisters, as we seek the Father Yah in Messiah, what, as I say often, and I want to say it again, the goal of the true believer in the Creator is to bring glory to the Creator. Did y'all hear that? So the goal of the true believer in the Creator is to glorify the Creator. And the best way you can glorify the Creator according to this word is to obey him. Okay? To obey him. And now you have to take it the most important step. To glorify him is to obey him. But to obey him, you need his spirit. If you can obey the Creator without his spirit, then everybody wouldn't be born sinners, right? You can't say all have sinned if you had the power to obey him without his spirit. We are born with a spirit that tends to disobedience. Because we are born and we learn to want things that go against the Creator. The things we all talked about, getting something for nothing, money, lust, desire, right? So we are naturally gone toward that, and the devil's ready to tempt us with those things. But when we are born again, we're born again of a spirit of the Father, which is the spirit of perfect righteousness. Then we want to render obedience, and it's by that same spirit that we render obedience. Without it, we can't. So, by the spirit of perfect righteousness, the Father keeps our mind so that he give us the wisdom to understand what choice we might make. Okay? Genesis chapter 3, we know the story. So the serpent is talking to Eve. he lies to her and he tells her she can be a god, right? Let's take it up from there. Genesis chapter 3 from verse 4 and 5. And the serpent said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die. Lie, right? There was a lie. And that's another thing. All temptation works because of a lie. Now, it's surrounded by a lot of truth, but there's a lie in there. And that's what sinks it. And most times you will recognize the lie, but you want the thing so bad, you're willing to ignore it. Isn't that true? Think of all the times you've been deceived in all of those ways. Lust, desire for money, in relationships. You saw the signs that something was wrong. But because you wanted this thing so bad, you went forward anyway. Right? So he said, you shall not surely die. Then he said, for Yah doth know that in the day you eat thereof, your eyes will be open and you'll be like gods. You'll be a god, knowing good and evil. So then she had to make a decision, a choice. What was her choice? Her choice was to walk away. How many times we'd have saved ourselves a lot of trouble if we just walked away? Is that correct? Is that true or not? How many times we would have saved, I know myself, I would have saved myself a lot of trouble a lot of times if I just walked away. But she didn't. She had a choice. She could have just walked away and talked to her husband about it before she did anything. But she didn't. So she starts thinking on her own about this thing. Verse 6. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, a tree to be desired, to make one wise, she took the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. She was commanded not to take of the tree. She repeated the command, but her desire to be a god overcame the command. Okay? Her desire to be a god overcame. And the Bible tells us she was deceived. Adam was not deceived. Therefore, Adam's sin is worse. She was tricked by the devil. That doesn't make her innocent. It makes her vulnerable and gullible, right? But when here she come with the fruit, Adam knows, the Bible says he was not deceived. He knew exactly what happened. So why did he eat? He's trying to save his wife. He's trying to be the savior. When she chose disobedience. Didn't work. There's only one savior. Okay? Now, brethren, let me tell you this. A lot of people are losing their minds today also in another way. I've seen this a lot in the 20-something years. Well, really, it's 40 years I've been reading and studying the Bible. But as I mentioned, there was an apostate period for sure. Okay, so on and off. But over that time, I've met thousands of people. And I've noticed something in the last 20 years, I'd say very strong. And that is when people can't control everything in their life, they become very difficult to deal with. So, and I find that mostly happens in religious situations. So people sometimes join a religion because they feel like joining a religion will give them control, the discipline that they feel is in a religion. People will join a religion and try to be disciplined in that religion because they're trying to control their environment. But it gets worse. They try to control others around them as well. Okay, and why? Because whatever reason, Usually it's some bad situation that they have had, something that's crushed their heart, their soul, something that's really, messed them up. So a lot of times, unfortunately, with the ladies, they've been molested when they were little and somebody overpowered them and molested them. And now they're seeking cleanness and control. And so they go to a religion so they can feel clean and they can feel like they're in control. And unfortunately, they're miserable. And there's men that has been hurt. I remember one of my best friends, still one of my best friends. I could say definitely one of my best friends. Okay, so long story short, he was at my wedding. That's how close we are. He was at my wedding. We would get together, my wife and I, with him and play a special Monopoly game every Thanksgiving for many, many, many years, like at least 20 years. It was like a tradition, right? We would invite other people too, but this brother, with me and my wife, we was always the ace, the middle of it, and we invite other people. That's how close we were. So he was single, and my wife and I played matchmaker. And we had connected him with a sister that we knew. And he was in the Bronx, but she was in Connecticut. But they connected. And he had things he wanted to accomplish in his business in the Bronx. So he wanted her to move to the Bronx. But she had just got her MBA and was into doing good in the corporation she worked in, and she didn't want to leave that corporation. So they end up splitting up. Okay. One night, a couple of years later, he calls me. Yo, guess what? What, man? I got married, he says. You got married? Now I'm upset. I mean, this is my ace, right? Your ace, you don't just get married without telling me where the wedding is or whatever. I was like, what? And my wife and I were both upset at him. Bro, what you mean you got married? You ain't tell us nothing? And then he said, well, it happened so fast. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, man, I run into this girl, and brothers, let me tell you, sisters, this is the term he used that some of y'all use, and I'm telling you, trust your God. If you believe in the Most High, trust him. He said, I went through my checklist, and she checked all my boxes. Oh, well, how long did you know before you met her? Before you married her? He said, we met, we fell in love like at first sight. We went on a vacation together in Florida, and 2 weeks later, we got married. I said, bro, this don't sound right. He said, don't judge me, man. Don't judge me. I was like, okay, all right, he's my boy. So I was like, okay, all right, but we got to meet this girl. Okay, we got to meet this girl. So at this time, I was living in Connecticut, and my man was in the Bronx. So we came down to New York. We said, we're gonna meet this sister, right? And he's telling me the checklist. She's fine, he said. Master's in nursing. Gotta own our own place. Okay. Oh, it's your checklist. Yeah, man. And she goes to church. She's religious. Goes to church. Studies her Bible, he said. Okay. So we came down. We were supposed to meet at a specific church. Him and her would come, and me and my wife would come. We meet there. Well, she came in first, and he was right. Statuesque model. I'm not even lying. Like a model, like somebody you would see modeling somewhere in Ebony or something like that. Or Jet. Y'all remember? I don't know if Jet is still out there, but back in the day, Jet magazine would come out every week. Y'all remember Jet? I don't know if y'all remember Jet if you in New York. Anyway, in the middle of Jet, they always put this very pretty girl in the middle of Jet magazine. And my brother used to get the Jet magazine, and you could see the girls were plastered all over his wall in his room. Well, this sister looked like, I'm not even front, she looked like she came out of Jet. But my wife and I both, there was a spirit about her that wasn't right, man. Just something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it. So, we was trying to be happy for my man. We came to his house. And of course, we came to his house. We were there for Sabbath. We came to his house, and Saturday night, we broke out the Monopoly. Because we had, even though it wasn't Thanksgiving, that's what we did. We broke out the Monopoly. Okay. I mean, we had Monopoly games, and we make up our own rules. And I've never laughed so hard. We would be crying, literally crying, laughing every time we played Monopoly, right? So we were looking forward to it. But she was acting real funny, man. She was acting real funny. And like one time, like my wife at that time was pregnant with my second oldest boy. It was 1991. My wife was about 7 months pregnant, 6, 7 months pregnant. So she was showing, and homegirl, like one time she like let a door slam on my wife when she walked in front of her. And then she was acting funny with us. And then she kept showing me pictures of her. It's my man's girl, his wife now. She showed me pictures of her only dressed in suds. I'm not lying. Only dressed in suds. And I'm like, I'm feeling real funny now because I'm like, what? But why she showing me these pictures? And we trying to play Monopoly and she's putting these pictures in my face. Then acting funny with my wife. So I was like, something not right. But, we couldn't say nothing to him because that was his wife now. Well, about 4 months later, I get a phone call from a man. What's up? What's up? And he sounded down. I've never heard him sound like that. And he said, I just got out of jail. And now, you got out of jail. What'd you do? What happened? And he told me. He said he came home. He had a real estate brokerage firm, his own firm. And he came home late one night. She was home. And she wanted to have sex with him. But he was tired. And when he said he was tired, she hauled off and smacked him in the face. And without thinking, he hauled off and smacked her back. She called the cops, said he was abusive, and he ended up in jail. Now, if you know my man, like I know him, like I said a long time, this is the most non-violent dude, like Martin Luther King style non-violent. That's what this dude is. Always a perfect gentleman. Always. And so it kind of threw us both, you hit, what she hitting you? So I said to him, bro, is this the first time she hauled off and smacked you? He said, oh no. It was going on from the first week we met. I was like, what? And you still married her? He said, I thought it was just because she was stressed. He said she was stressed. But he said every time they had a disagreement about anything, when she wanted to have sex and he didn't, or they didn't want to go to the same restaurant, she would haul off and smack him in the face. So he said, bro, that night I was tired and I was fed up. So I didn't even think, I just smacked her back. And then she told the police he's been abusing her. Now I know that wasn't true. Now after that, homie became the control freak of control freaks, man. He was trying to control every girl he met. He was controlling everything. What she wore, how she ate. He just lost it. And then I'm seeing a lot of brothers. I met this one dude, man. He was Caucasian, man. He got to the point with his woman where he was, I'm not lying to you. He would tell her how many squares of the toilet paper she could roll off to wipe her behind. I'm talking about crazy. And people are now losing their mind, man, trying to control other people because they're trying to be like they're the God, like they can control everything. And that's why you're also finding one of the leading causes of death for Caucasian males in the United States, age 45 and over, is suicide. And they were asking one, why do you, because he was having suicidal thoughts. This one man, they interviewed him. Why are you having these suicidal thoughts? What's going on? What did the doctor say? He said, because in my generations, the successive generation always did financially better than the previous generation. And he said, I'm the first generation where we're struggling financially. I can't provide for my wife the way my father provided for my mother and my grandfather provided for my grandmother. And he said, I'm not used to that and I can't handle that. The pressure to provide is too great and I can't handle it. And this was a common theme. And it's not the color of their skin. Don't get it twisted. It's society telling them you're in control of everything. And when you find that that's not the case, you feel like a failure. And a lot of them just can't handle it. Especially when they pass 45 and they're thinking like we should be headed to the retirement. Now, if you're used to having nothing, like a lot of Black people used to having nothing, used to living on the seat of your pants or been on your behind a couple of times like me, that don't bother you. You know what I'm saying? You're used to it. But if you have been thinking you've been in control all the time, you can't handle that. You can't handle it. And it's a symptom of a lot of people, no matter what color you are, no matter what race you are, it's a symptom. People think they're in control. Now, what does that have to do with us as followers of the faith of righteousness in Messiah and Yahushua and Father Yah? We learn through the trials he puts us through, right? We learn to trust him. We learn through hard trials to trust him in the most important things of our lives. It's not easy, but it's a process, a painful process that once you go through it, it gives you peace. Look at Isaiah chapter 26. Isaiah chapter, one of my favorites with regard to this here. Isaiah chapter 26. Isaiah 26 verses 1 through 4. Isaiah 26 from 1 through 4. And this actually comes from Isaiah 25 and 24, but we're just going to start here at 26 for this particular situation. In that day shall this song be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. Salvation will Yah appoint for walls and bulwarks. Open ye the gates, that the righteous nation, which keepeth the truth, may enter in. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Trust ye in Yahweh forever, for in Yahweh, and then it goes in big letter, Yahweh is everlasting strength. You cannot trust something unless you learn to trust it. Trust is earned. So you come to the Most High and you're born again because you have received the Spirit and you know that there's something that's happened to you in the Spirit. But to really learn to trust the Most High takes experience with the Most High. And so as you gain that experience with the Most High and you learn to trust him in the most difficult situation, and like we talked about money, right? Companionship, your partner, right? And lust and desire. When you learn to trust him in these areas, it's hard. It's hard. Let's say, for example, I knew a brother, and I'm not going to say my choice because I'm going to use the other brother, but my boy is another homie of mine. He was a small little Puerto Rican man. My man, we used to call him Danny Boy, but he was back in Harlem. Small little Puerto Rican, like 5'6", maybe $130, right? Skinny little Puerto Rican dude. Well, Danny Boy liked women that were big. Every time you see Danny Boy's girlfriend, she always was much bigger than him, right? And he refused to look at anything else. She had to have meat on her. She had to have bigger than him, taller than him usually. And I would say, Danny, but why don't you try something else? Because it failed. Failed relationship. Never could stick with anybody. And he wanted to be married to somebody. Could never do it. But he had his type. And sometimes, brethren, you got to let them, well, all the time, you got to let the Most High choose for you. Because if you choose for yourself 9 times out of 10, I mean, there's exceptions, but you're going to choose wrong. You're going to choose wrong. Okay. And so the scariest moment of my life was when I got on my knees and told the Most High, I'm not going to marry anyway or be with anybody until you choose them. And that was scary because I had a type that if you saw the girls I have been with, they could all be sisters. I'm not going to tell you what type it is, but they all can look alike. Okay. But when I got on my knees and said, you choose, I was like, dang, suppose she doesn't look like, or she's not what I would choose. It was scary. Okay. And that's what all of us, when you have something that you really is important to you and you leave it with the Most High, that's a test. That's a test. Okay. That's a test right there. And he will test all of us. Remember Abraham. Abraham left Ur the Chaldees at the command of Yah to go to a land that Yah said, I'm going to give to you and your children. I'll make you a great nation. It took 25 years for him to have Isaac. 25 years. Okay. And when the Most High blessed him with the promised seed, he was told, offer this son as a sacrifice to me. The seed he'd been waiting for 25 years. And he had been training this child. And now the child was grown. He was grown by that time. So he had a long time offering. And of course, he went to do it. That's what the Most High will do with all of us in different ways. The thing you want the most, that you're trusting him, that's not exactly what you're looking for, but he provided for you. You have to trust him. All of us. Money, passion, relationships, where you want to live. I grew up on Long Island, but I always loved New York. I always loved the city. And as soon as I turned 18, I moved. When I got old enough to leave my father's house, I went right to the city. And would stay there. I was planning on staying there for life. I would never leave New York City. I love New York City. Even when I was on Long Island and I was a kid, I always thought of New York as the best place in the world. But then I think I was 27 and he showed us, you got to leave New York. That was hard. That was hard. I mean, much we would complain about things happening, the crime, and this was in the 80s, so the crack trade was going on. People was doing stupid things, but even with all that, there was no place like New York. For me, I would stay there for life. And I look back oftentimes, I'd have turned into salt so many times. I look back wanting to come back, but we left. And we have never actually lived in the city since. Been to Connecticut and New Hampshire and now Virginia. Never went back. We go back to visit lots of times. Lots of times. Because I love New York. So we have family there, so we go back to visit. But I had to give that up. It was hard. I never wanted to leave New York. And there's no other city. I've been to DC. I've been to LA. Been to Atlanta. Been to Miami. Been to Orlando. There's no place. It's for me. Now, I can't speak for anybody, but for me, there's no place like New York. There's no place can compare to New York. And so I found every time I go to one of them cities, I find myself compared to New York till I got tired of hearing it for myself. Of course, you're not going to get the pizza you get in New York. Of course, you're not going to get the variety you get in New York. Of course, the styles here are going to be behind than they are in New York. And so, but I had to move because the Most High was moving us. Okay? So all of us are going to find out situations like that. You're all going to get tested. And you're going to be tested on something you want, something that's close to you, something that you have to give up or change or move off from or come to. Yeah. So, I mean, a couple of times I wanted to move back to New York and the Most High kept blocking it. blocking it. Finally, a few years ago, my wife and I just gave up and said, okay, we're not going back. That's it. He kept blocking it because we wanted to come back. But we said, no, can't go back. Can never go back. Okay. So that's how we get tempted. And that, in that, you're surrendering your mind and your spirit to the Most High. And then you'll have peace. Because when you do his will, you have peace. Especially it's in the spirit, not just works, not just forced. It's in the spirit. When it's forced, you'll find people that force righteousness by works. They'll try to force it on others as well as themselves. They'll demand things of the people closer to them that their people close to them may not be convicted about. That's when you know there's a problem. If you find yourself demanding of others because you're feeling convicted, that's a problem. That's a problem. See, I have learned again the hard way. Don't force my conviction on my family or my children. Just do my conviction. And if they follow, they follow. If they don't, they don't. But it's their choice. I raised my children, my wife and I raised our children while they were under our power. But when they became of age, there's nothing I could do. Some of my friends say, well, you go get your son, he doing this, or your daughter doing that. Hey, listen, when they become of age, you can't control them. That's their choice. Just like our Father in heaven. When we come of age, if we're not surrendering our will to him, he can't control our choices. You can decide to do whatever you want. It's your choice. He'll never force your choice. But like he did with our first parents, he commands us to do certain things and he blesses us with his spirit in order to accomplish his commands. If the first thing in our mind is glory to him. That's another thing. If it's glory to you, you'll figure a way to do what you want to do because it's glory to you. You understand? So that's the thing here. And only the individual really knows your motive. That's why the Bible, let me give you one more scripture here. Here in 2 Corinthians, I think it is, or is it 1 Corinthians? I always get them confused. No, it's 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 4. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 5. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 5. Notice what it says here. It said, Paul is admonishing the Corinthians, therefore judge nothing before the time, until the master come. Now listen to this. Who both will bring to light the hidden things of darkness and will make manifest the counsels of the hearts. Then shall every man have praise of Yah. So in other words, he's marking every motive. So if you could deceive me and act like this thing you want to do or this thing you want is about glory to the Most High when you know it's for you. But you can't deceive Yah. He writes down the real motives. He writes down the real reasons that you do and I do everything. He knows there's some people that do something for Yah's glory. For example, a person could be a Muslim. I don't believe in Islam. But a person could really believe in Islam and it could really have helped them, at least in their situation. They pray 5 times a day to the bricks in Mecca. Well, you know what? Who am I to judge? Right? I don't believe in it because I've read this book and I know this book is true, but I can't judge a person's motives, desires, what they're thinking, what they're going through. Can't judge that. Right? So all I could do is be faithful to the Most High and to my own heart according to his spirit on me and his word. Okay? So yeah. You understand? So that's what in these last days, the mind, the power of choice is the greatest power we have to overcome sin. It's the greatest power we have to be witnesses, to be true witnesses and true followers in obedience to the Father. The power of choice. The power to choose him and to relinquish to him our own desires, lusts, whatever. And so that's the word for today. It's really the mind. And again, in the description box, I put a couple of links where you can see real testimonies of mind control and what's going on with people today and how this thing is playing out. This thing with this sex slavery and this human trafficking, it literally exists in all 50 U.S. states. It is happening in regular neighborhoods all over the United States. Just regular. It's not like people getting snatched when they poor in poor neighborhoods. It's happening in rich neighborhoods, middle class neighborhoods, everywhere. Okay, and it's about snatching somebody and then getting control of their mind and then controlling their body. Religion's the same thing, especially when you see people telling you how much they need your money. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The sign is the money. When they begging you for their money, and this is for the Lord. No, it ain't. It's for their next new car. It's for their car payment. It's for their house payment. It's for their bank account. That's what it is. Instead of just coming out and saying that, they telling you it's for the Lord. You're going to bless you if you give to me. Always signs, brother. Don't ignore them. Don't ignore them. May the Most High bless you and keep you, and cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you, and lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. Thank you, brother. Shalom.